Hey again everybody, it's Dan back in the GnarlyChicken Garage. Wanted to do another video on the 09 Nitro chain case removal. Now I do this every year, take the whole chain case apart, inspect everything inside, clean it, put it all back together and add new fuel, or new oil. This can be a tricky disassembly and even more tricky assembly, so I wanted to do a video on exactly the step-by-step process in hopes that anyone who wants to do this themselves can again save themselves some money at the shop. Basic tools ready to go, doesn't take a whole lot. A 10 mil, a 12 mil, I think that's a 4 or maybe a 5-inch Allen, and some snap ring pliers, and down here I just always keep everything in order by putting it down first and keeping it in order on this little system here. That way you can just take it right back off again and pop it right back on. I've already got a few things done already, so the first thing you need to do is take off the emergency brake. So let me just check and see here. This is a 4 mil. So you're going to loosen these off, which I've already done. Big band-aid on my finger again today because I sliced my finger open the other night shooting on the range, and it's a bleeder. So these have springs captured in them. You can only take these out so far before you have to put the springs, push the springs in, or move the emergency brake a little bit to allow access for that spring to come out. So, just undo this guy. That should be good. Rest by hand. These are pretty long. So, now I'm just going to set this aside, hang it down over the shock. So that's off. That can stay there. Next thing is your main brake. Now there's two 12 mil bolts in behind here. You need to snap off. And pop that out. And that will free the caliper. And I'm going to set that aside as well. Hang him on the shock. Put that bolt down. Now, the next thing is your brake linkage, or sorry, your reverse linkage. And you can see how this works when you pull up on your reverse and down again. It locks in your linkage, which moves your reverse forks inside here, which separate your drive and reverse gears. Take this off. I've already loosened all of these. There's him. Set him down. Now you can separate this. Like so, and just let it dangle. And take off the caliper. And there's a snap ring in here. Be careful that you don't lose these guys. And keep your thumb around it. Bring him off. So, this is the first thing I'm taking off of this shaft. So again, reverse order. This comes off first, so I put it onto this first. And that's going to reveal a spacer. You work on these for a while and you start getting interruptions, or the phone rings, or your buddy comes over to show you what offset wheels he has on his Tundra, which I got a buddy coming to do that shortly. And after a while you get some interruptions in what you're doing, and you can easily forget where things go back on. So that's why I like to use that system. I learned that from a guy online, actually. Okay. Now we have a set screw in here, and that is a Torx. So there are 5 chain case bolts that you need to crack loose. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so I've just loosened those up for now, and I'm going to take out the filler cap, spout. There's a standard setting and there's a reverse setting, but I just dump the recommended amount in usually, and I never worry about it, just like an oil change. So now what I'm going to do is crack this bottom drain bolt. So I pulled off the washer, and I'll take that out with the drain bolt, and let that do its thing. So I change this usually every year. I'm pretty sure, well, I know I did it last year. I don't know if I did it the year before, because the year before I did very little mileage, but in any event, set that aside over here on my little parts. So I'm going to let that drain out. While I'm doing that, I'm going to crack these 2 10mm bolts here. And this one holds your reverse gears in place, and this one over here holds your assembly for your chain tensioner. Camera back up. Now each one of these little 10 mils has a rubber washer on them. I've replaced these already last year. Be careful with these because they will, deteriorate over time, so they do need to be replaced. And you don't want to be losing your oil out through there. And that one's still in good shape, so that's good. The only other thing I have to do is just loosen off my timing chain. So I'll just loosen off this nut here, that's your locking nut, and then I'll back this off. Just enough to loosen this up a little inside. Okay, so you just loosen him down a tad. And keep your eye on where roughly it is, because these do have to be adjusted to a certain degree of correctness when you put them back on. Now I can take my 10 mil and just back him off. That should be enough. Okay, so now this is ready to come off. It's going to come off a little rough. You obviously got to take the bolts out here first, but you may have to give this a little punch with a soft hammer or whatever. But remember, when it does come off, there's going to be some things come out of here you've got to pay attention to. Okay, so before I do that, I'm going to stick my drain bolt back in, just so I know where it is. Take out the rest of these guys. You can see what I'm doing here. I just put an extension on an extension so I can get in there and just hand twist that out. You can see over here, I put these all on the floor, facing the same way they're going to go back in. So I use the same bolts for each bolt back. Between this little collar, there's a small, very easy to miss O-ring which should come out on the inside of the case. Very hard to spot, very hard to remember to put back in. So keep your eye on that when you pull this out. Okay? I love the old rubber mallets. Okay, so I think what happened was I got this loose finally. I just had to make some taps on this. I believe when I put that set screw in last year, you know, with the Loctite just seated onto the teeth, the splines. And then just grabbed a hold of the top and the bottom, pushed out together, and that freed this out here. So there's your bushing, or your spacer, whatever you want to call it, with the key, the little locking key, which I'm going to put back in, set screw. Put this guy back in so we don't lose him. So I'll take the oil off of that, and then of course he's going to go down on top of here. That's the most issues that people have when they put this thing back together, is they gotta get these forks lined up to put back in again, which can be tricky. So remember there's a little O-ring in here, and we're gonna look for that when we pull this off. There's another little clink. There's another bushing. And the O-ring. Should be right in here, which I don't see. Interesting. I'll have to look in the bottom for it. It may have fallen at the bottom. But anyway, it will be in there somewhere. So this is the inside of your chain case, leaking oil through the bolt holes. And these are your gears, or your this is your reverse fork that needs to go in place down in these little grooves when we put this back together. Now there's another bushing in here that has to come out. Alright, no sooner did I turn the camera off and got looking at the chain case and found the O-ring. It's sitting right in there where I thought it might. Now last year it popped out and went right inside the chain case. But I'll just set this down, and here's the O-ring right here. Okay, so be aware of that because it's easily lost. And that was just sitting right inside. So I just tucked that in first before I put in the bushing, and that helps to seal this little cavity right here. Should be good. That is pretty clean. There's still a little residual oil in there, but that's all right. Good. Okay. So over here is your tensioner, and that's the screw that I undid over here, comes through here and pushes to increase or decrease the tension on your chain. Now I will look up in the owner's manual. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, when you put this back in, you turn it all the way in hand tight only, and then back it out like half a turn. Some guys back it out turn and a half. I usually do a turn out, but I'll just double check. But everything looks good in here. Now this is your reverse gear. There's a spring inside here. This guy comes out, and there is your spring right here. Now, don't lose your spring, and if you are taking the whole system out to do a track change or whatever, which you may have to do, everything just pulls right out. This has to be bolted down here. So this little spring goes right into this little hole, and these teeth have to line up with these teeth. Now you can put this on upside down and backwards, and as well as this one, and I have done that because they're very similar. And when I've taken everything out and put it back in again, I put them in reverse order by mistake, and as soon as I bolt everything back up, the reverse did not work, so I'm like, okay, obviously I put something in wrong. Thought I had a spacer in wrong, or wrong orientation, whatever, but it ended up being that I just had this in backwards. So very easy to do. So slide this back on, make sure your spring rests in that little recessed hole, which it is. Go grab your washer that you just threw across the floor for the second time. Stick him back on. And I'm happy with everything, so now I'm going to bolt everything back up again. And this is the moment everyone's been waiting for. So I'm going to shut the camera off and have a drink of coffee and get back to you. So now the chain case itself, this is where some people struggle. So I'm going to lift up on the linkage so that the reverse fork is in the upward position, because it needs to sit down in these little grooves right here, and that's what pushes this in and out to engage your reverse. So this just takes some time and some patience, and time and patience, that's about it. And everything has to be lined up in order for everything to fit back on. So I'm going to try to do just that. And as you're pushing this on, you have to sort of let the fork, reverse fork, sort of fall down into place, into its home as you're pushing and trying to line everything back up again. And you'll know when it goes in, because there's really no other place for it to go. My buddy showed up with his Tundra and wanted to look at a few things with his truck. So in the meantime, I got everything back buttoned up again. I'm going to explain to you what I did. It took me a couple attempts to get the chain case back on again. Now, I would not have been able to show you unless I had another set of hands exactly how this reverse fork slides into place with the rest of the case. So I've done this probably 6 or 7 times over the 10 years I've had this sled, and sometimes it's taken me 1 attempt, sometimes it's taken 2, other times 3 or 4. You just got to take your time and just play with that as you're moving this in. And it's there's no tolerances. It's such a tight fit, it's only going to go on one way. So I've put everything back in, and the first thing I did was hook this back up, and then I went and I put the bolts, the 5 bolts, just finger tight, and then I took that little O-ring and you put that in place in here, move it in with your fingers just so that it's out of sight as far as you can push them in, and then you push this collar on, and that collar pushes that little O-ring inwards and helps to seal the oil inside of this bearing face. And then you put the set screw back in and Loctite that. Now I've torqued all of the bolts on here. I can't remember what they are now exactly. They're not much. I think 28 Newton meters, I believe. And I put this in with some Loctite and just gave that a little bit of a snug, not too much. And these I put in as well and torqued them down. I believe those were, I have to check the manual again, but maybe 8 Newton meters, not much. Actually, no, they were 10, I believe, and I put them at 9. So then I went ahead and tightened down your chain tensioner, and you just, like I said, move that in finger tight until you can't move it anymore, and then hold on to this, lock this in place, and that's good. I measured 200 milliliters of Yamalube oil for the chain case and dumped that in, so that's all in now. Now you can check your reverse, and if it moves, you know, smoothly without a hitch, then you're good. So up, down, and lock. And if it's not in place in here, this will not work at all. Put this spacer in. There you go. Put the brake on. Put your spacer on. Put this guy on. There we go. Snap him in place. Make sure he snaps in place. That's got some movement to it, which is what it's supposed to do. And now I can go ahead and put the brake back on and the emergency brake, same way you took it off. So pretty simple to do that. I won't bother boring you with the details. So that's it, guys. That's your complete disassembly and assembly of your Nytro chain case. If you have any questions, leave some comments or questions below, and please feel free to subscribe, like, and share. And that's it for now. Thanks for watching, and ready to go for another winter.